The Convention of States movement is a national effort to trigger an Article V constitutional convention, a process built into the U.S. Constitution that allows the states to convene and propose amendments to the Constitution. Unlike the more common method of proposing amendments through Congress, this approach bypasses Congress and relies on the states exercising their constitutional authority. Convention of States+1 Article V text, in part. On the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, Congress shall call a convention for proposing amendments, U.S. Constitution, Article V. National Archives. The Convention of States project, led by Citizens for Self-Governance, supports this route, aiming to convene a convention limited in scope to only specific categories of amendments. 1. Impose fiscal restraints on the federal government. 2. Limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. 3. Place term limits on federal officials, including members of Congress. Convention of States+1 Current status of the movement: states must pass identical or similar resolutions calling for an Article V convention focused on these topics. Convention of States: as of 2025, 19 states have passed the Convention of States resolution. Convention of States. A total of 34 states must pass such a resolution to compel Congress to call the convention under Article V Convention of States. After amendments are proposed, they must be ratified by 38 states, 3/4, to become part of the Constitution, unchanged from any standard amendment process. National Archives types of amendments the movement envisions. Supporters typically discuss several categories of proposals that could be considered under the Convention of States framework. Commonly discussed amendments: balanced budget amendment, constitutional requirement for federal spending not to exceed revenue. Convention of States. Limits on federal powers, narrow interpretation of the Commerce and General Welfare clauses to curb federal overreach. Convention of States. Term limits, caps on terms for members of Congress and possibly Supreme Court justices, other federal officials. Convention of States. Limits on treaties and regulations restricting the reach of executive actions or international agreements affecting domestic law. Convention of States. Taxation reform provisions, limits on federal taxation levels or requiring supermajority for new taxes. Convention of States. These are potential examples. The convention would vote on what to formally propose, if it happens. Convention of States. Why supporters advocate this route? Proponents argue it's a constitutional check on federal overreach and long-term fiscal irresponsibility. Convention of States. It empowers state governments and the people instead of relying on Congress alone. Convention of States. A convention limited to specific topics, as defined in state resolutions, would focus exclusively on reforms supporters want, like fiscal restraint and term limits. Convention of States. Debates and concerns. While supporters emphasize these benefits, scholars and critics raise important questions. 1. Scope and limits of the convention. Some legal experts observe that the Constitution does not specify procedural rules for an Article V convention, including whether a convention must be limited in subject matter or how its rules are set. Wikipedia+1. Supporters argue states can restrict the topics via their applications, and final amendments still require ratification by 38 states, a high safeguard against unwanted changes. Convention of States. Critics argue there's legal uncertainty about whether a convention could go beyond its original directive, sometimes called the runaway convention concern. Wikipedia 2. Lack of precedent. The U.S. has never actually held an Article V convention to propose amendments since the Constitution's ratification. Wikipedia 3. Broad participation and partisan dynamics. Debate exists over how delegates are chosen, how each state votes, and how political polarization might influence proceedings. Convention of States. 4. Ratification Safeguards. Even if a convention proposes amendments, 38 states must ratify them before they become law, the same threshold used for amendments originating in Congress. National Archives Summary. The Convention of States movement uses a constitutional mechanism under Article V that's never been used before, convening a convention upon application of 34 state legislatures to propose amendments limited to fiscal restraint, limiting federal power, and imposing term limits. Convention of States. Supporters emphasize its potential to address federal overreach and structural issues, while critics point to legal uncertainties and the untested nature of the process. Regardless, proposed amendments would still require ratification by 3/4 of the states to take effect, providing a significant check on any changes. National Archives Template Language. State Legislature Resolution, Article V. You can adapt this for your state house or state senate. Keep the language tight and clearly limited to Article V topics. Model Resolution Text. A resolution applying to Congress for the calling of a convention for proposing amendments pursuant to Article V of the Constitution of the United States, limited to proposing amendments that impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and impose term limits on its officials and members of Congress. Whereas, the federal government has exceeded its constitutional limits, resulting in unsustainable debt, fiscal irresponsibility, and encroachments upon the sovereignty of the states and the liberties of the people, and whereas Article V of the Constitution of the United States provides a mechanism for the states to propose amendments when Congress fails to act, and whereas the citizens of this state seek reforms that restore constitutional balance through fiscal restraints, limits on federal power and jurisdiction, and term limits on federal officials. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the legislature of the state of XXX1 that the legislature of the state of XXX hereby applies to Congress, pursuant to Article V of the Constitution of the United States, to call a convention for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution, limited to the following subject matters: imposing fiscal restraints on the federal government, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, imposing term limits on federal officials and members of Congress. 2. That this application shall be considered a continuing application until at least 2/3 of the legislatures of the several states have made applications on the same subject matter. 3. That the legislature of the state of expressly reserves the right to recall or replace any delegates who exceed the authority granted by this resolution. 4. That the Secretary of State is directed to transmit copies of this resolution to the President and Secretary of the United States Senate, the Speaker and Clerk of the United States House of Representatives, and the presiding officers of the legislatures of each of the several states. Tip: many states prefer nearly identical language, so Congress cannot dispute subject matter consistency. How to contact your state legislators, step by step. A. Find your legislator. Search your state legislature. Find my legislator. You'll usually need your zip code or address. You're looking for your state House representative, your state senator. B. Email, letter template, effective and amp. Respectful. Subject: support Article V Convention of States Resolution. Dear Representative, Senator, I am a constituent from XXX and I respectfully urge you to support a Convention of States resolution under Article V of the U.S. Constitution. Our federal government has exceeded its constitutional boundaries through unchecked spending, regulatory overreach, and career politicians insulated from accountability. Article V empowers the states to restore balance when Congress will not. I specifically support a convention limited to fiscal restraints on the federal government, limits on federal power and jurisdiction, term limits for federal officials and members of Congress. Any proposed amendments would still require ratification by 38 states, ensuring strong safeguards. I respectfully ask that you co-sponsor or vote in favor of an Article V Convention of States resolution and stand with the people of this state in defending constitutional self-governance. Thank you for your service and consideration. Sincerely, your name, city, district, C. Phone call script, 2 minutes. Hello. My name is XXX and I live in XXX district. I'm calling to urge the representative, senator to support an Article V Convention of States resolution focused on fiscal restraints, limits on federal power, and term limits. Congress has proven unable to reform itself. Article V is a constitutional solution led by the states. I hope the representative, senator will stand with constituents and support this effort. Staffers log calls volume matters more than debate. Ways to engage and strengthen Convention of States efforts. A. Grassroots action. Attend state capitol hearings when CUS resolutions are introduced. Encourage county GOP, libertarian, or nonpartisan civic groups to pass supporting resolutions. Host local constitutional workshops explaining Article 5b. Coalition building. Reach out to small business associations, veterans groups, faith-based civic organizations, fiscal responsibility, and liberty groups. Frame CUS as nonpartisan constitutional self-defense. C. Media and messaging. Submit letters to the editor to local newspapers. Call into local radio shows, especially talk radio. Share simple talking points on social media. 34 states can call it. 38 states must approve it. The states propose. The people ratify. This is already in the Constitution. D. Become a delegate or organizer. Many states recruit grassroots district captains. Some states pre-define delegate rules, ethics requirements, and recall procedures. Legal, civic, military, and constitutional scholars are especially valued. E. Long-term strategic framing. You may find it effective to frame CUS as restoring federalism, a peaceful constitutional reset, a non-violent alternative to instability, a safeguard against centralized authoritarian drift. This framing resonates across political and generational lines. Final thought. The framers included Article 5 specifically for moments like this, when federal power grows beyond consent and correction must come from the states. Global Robotics Corporation.